Tuli ne Benjamin Katana ng'ono yakulira ebyensimbi mu kibiina kya National Unity Platform. Waliwo obukodyo Mwai Museveni wa generali bw'abadde akozesa okwenyereza mu ntebe, Bobi Wine abituddemu n'abyonoona byonna. Kati ensaawa yonna gavumenti ya Mwai Museveni egenda kwerinda eggula ennume y'ekigo bannankyukakyuka mugololeeze okulayira. Anti obukodyo bwonna General Museveni bulijjo bw'akozesa okwenywereza mu ntebe bw'abadde akozesa okulimbalimba n'okuza bannayuganda obwongo. Kyagulanyi Center mu Robert Bobi Wine asumuludde entanda buli munnayuganda kati amaaso gabikkuse era essaawa yonna mugenda kulaba gavumenti ya Mwai Museveni ng'eri ku ddimwa nga nayo kati esomwako busomwa nti nno zaaliwo era yaliwo. Nkusaba otegatteko n'obwombefu bw'ekika ekya waggulu tugende wali mu Boston, Washington DC. Tugende wali tusobole okufuna ebigambo by'omukulu ono Benjamin Katana akulira ebyensimbi mu ggwanga mu gavumenti ya Kyagulanyi Nup People Power ng'ayogera obukodyo ba dictator bwe bakozesa okwenywereza mu ntebe era biki birina okukolebwa okulaba nga badictator abo munnange entebe bazivaamu nga Kyagulanyi Center mu Robert Bobi Wine yakolezezza dda akabiri eti ayabas tutandike.
Because for us who have got the chance to listen to him, have always got wisdom from his presentations. And we thought it would be cheating of us for him to go away. He is always a man in the background. But it will be cheating of us if he does not share whatever he has to share. So, my brother, you have, I know we had given you too much time, but we have cut it now to about 15 minutes. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much, Waiswa. People power, our power, NUP, everywhere. Good evening, comrades. My name is Benjamin Katana, like I have been introduced. And this evening, I have the honor to be here, first of all, not like Waiswa, who is happy because he has had a chance to go to White House, but because we are here to discuss very important business of removing a dictatorship from Uganda. I'm also very happy to be here because of the critical role that you have been playing in this struggle. The diaspora community, not necessarily of today, but since time immemorial, has been a very critical player in the liberation struggles of Africa. And actually most of the rallying ideologies about African liberation, like Pan-Africanism, originated from the diaspora. So it is very important that you have been playing this role, but it's not surprising because of many factors, and one of them being the exposure that you have had that many people back at home have not had. You know what it means to live in a country where there is justice. You know what it means to live in a country where there is inclusivity. You know how to live in a country where institutions work. Some of our brothers and sisters have not had that chance. But there are those who have had the chance to live in these communities, but they have chosen to ignore what happens back at home. So for doing the right thing, we thank you and we are very proud of you. So today I have been given a responsibility to talk about a subject that we are all familiar with, that we speak about every day. But to lead us in a discussion about the nature of the dictatorship that we are dealing with in Uganda and how we can add another gear in disempowering that dictatorship. But we must note that fighting a dictatorship is not an event. And in this room, I have seen veterans of the liberation struggle in Uganda. I may not need to mention names. They have been at it. They have not given up. And those that entrench the dictatorship, they would actually want you to give up. So this subject we are all familiar with. We have discussed it time and again and talk about it. But you see, like the devil, what is evil? All religious sects talk about the devil. They talk about evil. They never get tired. Because also the devil does not rest. So while we have talked about the dictatorship and we have tried to diagnose and understand it, even the dictatorship does not rest, so we must never rest from talking about it until we have been able to dismantle it and we set Uganda on the path of democratic governance where there is justice and inclusivity. And I'm not discussing this as an expert, but we'll be sharing ideas. And so we are dealing with a dictatorship that has had close to 40 years of investment in an infrastructure that enables it to thrive. And so you have an individual, there has been a fusion between the state of Uganda and the person of General Museveni. That is why you see when we have elections, you ask yourself, the army, the police, the electoral commission, and all these agencies of the state, they are active participants on the side of one of the individuals contesting in an election. Why? Because General Museveni has become the state of Uganda. So when you are a legitimate opponent against him, you are criminalized. You are looked at as a criminal who is now fighting with the state of Uganda. That's why we have our supporters today being charged in the General Court Martial for treason and other related cases. Why? Because they have taken a position against the person who has become the state of Uganda. And so for us, and many times people ask questions that you people of opposition, why is it that you are talking about Museveni this, Museveni that? It's because, and my brother here was talking about the Freedom Charter, which is a very brilliant idea. But all these ideas, there is a roadblock. Today, what is left of our Constitution talks about so many fundamental rights. But because there is a system which has rendered the law useless, these rights cannot be enforced. He controls the police, he controls the courts, he controls the DPP. So even when you are arrested for no reason and taken to police, the police will not take a decision in accordance with the law, but in accordance with the wishes of the one who controls the police. When your file is sent to the DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, they will not give advice on the basis of the law, but on the basis of the person who controls it. When your matter is taken to court, the decision is not going to be made on the basis of the law, but on the basis of the wishes of the one who controls it. So that is the situation that we are dealing with. So all these brilliant ideas are very good, but first we must create an environment that will enable these ideas to be implemented. To enable these ideas so they don't remain ideas on paper, but there is a conducive political environment that enables laws and policies to be meaningful. And so we also need to realize that the direction of how the dictatorship manifests in Uganda is not a unique case. That is how all dictatorships span out. If you have been a close follower of developments in countries that have gone through a similar trajectory like ours, you can take an example of DRC or Zaire under Mobutu, that he controlled everything, and those who supported him and believed him thought he was invincible, that not even death would take him, not any rebel group would take him, not any political organization would take him out of power. But as we speak today, Mobutu is history. In our neighbor, today in Uganda, people draw lessons from Kenya. They praise Kenya. But my sister here will bear witness before coming into force of the 2010 constitution in Kenya, especially under the days of President Moi. Moi was the state of Kenya. And he did not leave power because he chose to, but because people like you, people like us, organized and built pressure that compelled him to say, now I'm negotiating for my exit. I'm using these examples to show us that much as, because dictatorships thrive on perception, normally they are very weak, they are weaker than you think. But regardless of that perception, for us to know that if we do what we have to do, like we are doing today, and in other avenues, then the dictatorship, which we perceive to be very strong, will crumble like a pack of cards. So it is very important that we understand how dictatorships normally manifest and what enables them to thrive. And one of them is the reliance on force and violence. I think that one needs no emphasis. All of us here have seen what has been happening in Uganda. Even if we draw examples from the last elections of 2021, just as an example, because what changed maybe is the magnitude. As far as 1996, when the late Dr. Semogoyle contested with Museveni, they have a massive violation of human rights. In 2001, massive violations of human rights. People died for choosing a side. In 2006, the same story. In 2011, the same story. What changed this time around is the magnitude, and largely on account of increased pressure. When dictatorships and regimes world over lose legitimacy, like the one in Uganda has lost legitimacy, they resort to about three things. One of them is violence, the other one is money and patronage, and the third one is manipulation. There are several, but those are the key. So violence and force, but the beauty is that this force, regardless of how normally it is deployed, eventually, once the people are organized, they overwhelm these dictatorships, and even the enforcers who have been helping them to enforce this violence abandon them and run away. And I think we have seen these examples in so many countries. The other way through which dictatorships thrive, like ours in Uganda, is patronage. That instead of focusing on serving people, instead of deploying money on services, instead of investing in hospitals and schools, instead of investing in infrastructure, invest in individuals, a few individuals, and use these few individuals to influence the many who are not benefiting from the government. That's why you see the government in Uganda every now and then is creating constituencies, is creating districts. If you want to serve the people in an area, what they need is a hospital. What they need is a road. What they need is a good school. What they need are services. But you will create a district and have this person who has become a chairman, then there is a DISO, there is another DC, that is a chain of patronage that is always on duty during campaigns to make sure that they rig for him, to make sure that he wins regardless of whether he has support or not. So that patronage system is deliberate, and one of the key intention is to make sure that they use that patronage system to manipulate the rest of the population to side with him. Exactly. The other one is manipulation, which they normally do through deception. They will pity people against each other, organizations against each other. My brother Waiso here was talking about parties that we now know were given money to fight with NUP, supposedly parties in the opposition. And they will create rumors and bring them to NUP against other parties. They will take rumors to other parties so that these parties, instead of coming together to work together, to confront, challenge and defeat the dictatorship, they are always at war with each other. And I think many times we have seen it when people that are supposed to be in the same group, same organization, the oppressed people, are up in arms against each other. And for them, they are just standing there laughing. Say, these people who are fighting against each other, how can they be trusted with the leadership of the country? And they know that there are so many Ugandans who are going to listen to that deception and fall for it. So it is important that we are always alert, and we also have a responsibility to sensitize other citizens of Uganda not to fall for that deception and manipulation. Of course, the other aspect is money, and the circumstances in Uganda have been that because we have a person who is the de facto governor, who is everything, he can choose how much money should be released to go to an individual or organization for purposes of hiring support, not for purposes of services. You have seen people at the rallies, they are ferried. If he has a rally in Masindi, the whole of Unyoro will be ferried to a rally in Masindi, in buses. They are fed, they are given transport to refund, and he will create an impression that he has support. Because much as his plan is to rig an election, and I think you have been seeing it now, the so-called birthday parties and other events of the son, it's not because they think that he needs the people to win, but they want to project an impression that he has support. And when the rigging takes place, they'll say, but it was very clear from the beginning. Everywhere he has gone, people have welcomed him, have supported him, so the results are not surprising. So we need to be always aware and on the guard against that. And while the diaspora has been a very critical player in the liberation struggles, I think with the emergence of people power, you became a very big target of that money. You have people running around the cities with money and promises because they know the capacity that you have to support their efforts of installing a life presidency in Uganda. The other aspect is divide and rule. And this manifests in so many ways. Today, our country is fractured. People look at themselves in terms of the tribe, not because it helps them, but that is the environment that the dictator has created. People ask me that you are a Munyankore, how can you not support Museveni? But they don't ask, for example, General Katumba Wamala, why he supports Museveni. Is he a Munyankore? But you see how dictatorships work, is that they humiliate people for a long time, to the extent that people lose confidence in themselves. That someone thinks that a Munyankore cannot support a Muganda, but there are thousands of Baganda working for Museveni. Have people lost pride to that level, to think that another tribe cannot see value in a person from that tribe? So that divide and rule only helps him. It doesn't help anybody else. Today, after losing support, because for a long time, Museveni survived on support from rural Buganda. And they were very confident that even if Wesjo wins in Kampala, in Mukono town, in Masaka, in Mukomansimbi, they will vote for Museveni. But after 2021, the dynamics changed. That is why his focus now is on the greater north. because he knows if he can manipulate people in Ankole. Because you see, during campaigns, we would go to the West and people and Mama Jory will tell you. And people would say, but they are saying that they want to chase our children from Kampala. Because that's the lie that they were sold. But none of these children were brought to Kampala by Museveni. They came on their own. But that's what they told them. The other day I saw in one of the districts in the north that they were chasing Baganda who own land business. I said, but these people, their brothers and sisters own homes in Kampala. So if the people in the central were to retaliate, where would that leave the country? But these are victims of the manipulation of the dictator. Because if people can stand together and start asking questions that are based on issues, then he would be disempowered. But if people are lost in those squibbles, he's the only beneficiary. And during campaigns, it was very common. And people would say, oh, the people in Uganda are supporting President Kyagulanyi because he's a Muganda. But he's not the first Muganda to run for president. But in all these elections, you have been winning in Uganda when there were Baganda running for president. And so they had to find all sorts of reasons to further divide the country. So that people, when he goes to Ankole, they will vote for him on the basis of saying he's giving them protection. When he goes to the north, he's protecting them from the people of this side. And like that. So he's able, and so we have a duty to make sure that we continuously engage the population and cause to enhance civic competence for people to be able to discern and know that this is what we want, and what we are interested in is what this person and his government or her government are promising us and are capable of doing, not because he's my neighbor. The other aspect that enables the dictatorship to thrive is infiltration. And I think this one needs no emphasis. You see now what is happening in one of our sister parties. People are saying money was brought, we know where it came from, and now that party is fighting, not fighting with the dictator, but fighting against each other, because the organization has been infiltrated. And he will create that infiltration, but also make sure that it works for him. I always joke with some colleagues that towards, I don't know if this is of 2021, there were many back and forth meetings with our colleagues in the opposition. And in one of after the meetings, I joked with our president. I said, if anything leaked from this meeting, I would be the first suspect. Because I'm alive to the realities of our politics. But after the elections, one of the key participants in that meeting, who was not a Munyankole like me, was appointed a minister in Museveni's cabinet. No, and I'm not saying it, but for him, infiltration works for him, but he will still use it also to cause unnecessary suspicion. You treat each other with suspicion, but even the people he's working with sometimes are not necessarily those that share identity with him or anything else. So, you know, they say that forewarned is forearmed. We need to be able to know who our allies are and who our enemies are. And like our president many times emphasizes, let people be judged by their actions. And so, I hope I'm still on time. I should be summarizing. 2 minutes, okay. Okay, maybe I will leave out some of the things. But how do we progress? How do we disempower the dictatorship? because you realize that that system of patronage, it is largely facilitated by institutions, churches, cultural institutions, trade unions that should be the vanguard of liberation. So how do we make sure that we are able to bypass his stooges in these institutions and we deal with the people directly? I think that's one of the things that we need to focus on so much, that we are able to disempower these stooges and we work with the people directly and overwhelm him. For him, it's comfortable that I have bought this for that pastor, I have bought this for this cultural leader, but then we weaken them, bypass them, and deal with the people. Number two, to expose, isolate, and weaken the dictatorship. And there was a question here about 2026 and things of that nature. I think for us, we are in the business of removing a dictator. If we are able to achieve it today, well and good. If we are able to achieve it 2 days from today, well and good. If by 2026 or any other election that has not been achieved and there is an avenue for doing so, I think people should not shy away from doing that. And so, by exposing the protests that took place here today and other things of that nature, using social media, you comrades have been very active going to these very critical offices, sharing information so that people get to understand the person they are dealing with. It would help us to further weaken him. The other one is starving the predatory system of resources. People, once the person has been fully exposed and the institutions, and someone here was talking about the billions of money that the dictatorship gets and uses to further entrench itself, if it can be starved of such resources through deliberate actions, then it also further weakens it. The other aspect is for us to have clarity of purpose. As individuals involved in this struggle, we must be very clear on what our purpose is, what we want to achieve. And then the other important discussion becomes, how do we get there? So we must be able to break down what removing a dictatorship in Uganda is and what we want to achieve after we have done that. And then we are able to cascade it down to the last person on the radar, that it is a shared idea by the leaders and those that they lead. You are standing here telling me that comrades, this is a discussion that we can have for the whole day and night. But because of the time constraints, I'll stop here for now. I thank you for listening to me, and may God bless you.
God bless you. Bigambo bya Benjamin Katana. Benjamin Katana munanu People Power era nga yakulira ebyensimbi mu kibiina kya National Unity Platform. Ebigambo bye mubiwulidde aw'amagezi era engeri abadictator gye bakolamu okwenywereza mu ntebe era biki ebirina okukolebwa okulaba nga Mwami Museveni agibwa mu ntebe mwali. Bingi abyogedde nti omubeera amagye, okwesa amagye, okukwata, okutiisatiisa, okutulugunya, byonna abikola nga bagezaako okwenywereza mu ntebe, naye ate era olunaku lumala ne lukya ne bavaamu. Agamba nti bannayuganda basigale ku ebyo byekka ebijja okubayamba okujja ku Mwami Museveni. Bajja kulabira awo nga ekintu kiteeredde nga gavumenti ya Mwami Museveni ateegudde nga Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine alayidde nga bafuna ku Uganda empya. Bo balemezeemu bongere kukola ebyo bikolebwa, okutambuza abaluwa mu z'ofiisi ez'enjawulo, okwekalakaasa, okukola buli ekigwanidde ekinaasobola okujja ku Mwami Museveni bakikole. Gavumenti ya Museveni si ya kitalo nnyo nti bagitiira bwereere. Naawe ab'ekyokulabirako nti bwe batyo badictator abalala bangi baaliwo nabo nga bayita ba kitalo nnyo, naye Mukama Katonda yabaviiramu era gavumenti zaabwe ne zigwa. Nyamwami Museveni si akitalo nnyo si asoose gavumenti ejja kugwa ayagala oba tayagala Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine akwate enkata ate bannayuganda beeyagaleko nga batuuse mu Uganda empya. Tuli wano mu ggwanga na America, Washington DC, lukuŋŋaana lwa National Platform olumanyiddwa nga NUP Diaspora Convention 2023 nga bannayuganda abakulembeze foot soldier bonna bwe bali okuva Uganda ne mu ggwanga la America. Mwebale kuba mubaddeko Mukama Katonda nsaba bankuumire tujja kuba tuddamu mweraba.